तुम तक सकते हो इसे क्या रहे यार दीना पर
diaspora writing.
Okay. So whether it is it's the same tune or is a different tune, you can tell when you speak different language. So obviously it applies to writing as well, because it has different audience and maybe different structure as well sometimes. Well, I have given here a basic sort of information about the writing I have come across in different South Asian languages, particularly Urdu, Punjabi, the Pakistani side, and Bahari Meetri and Potwari. I can't read Punjabi, Gurmukhi or Hindi or Bangla or Gujarati, but of course there is a lot of literature has been produced in those languages as well here. But I don't qualify to cover those languages. So I will just briefly, as you can say from these languages which are taught at okay. Sorry, these are all the salespeople. Yeah. But I don't have slides for those languages, but these are the languages which are taught at the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS. Bengali, Gujarati, Hindi, Nepali, Pali, Punjabi, Prakrit, Sanskrit, Sinhala, Tamil, and Urdu. And from my experience here in Britain, I have learned that there is one of the largest languages of British South Asians remain invisible and is mainly spoken only. And that is my mother tongue. And I did not know about it till I migrated to Britain and met some Pakistani and Kashmiri activists here. So these languages are used in different spheres, or there are different sites of these where these languages are used. Obviously, translation that is mainly in sorry. Oh, I'm going fast. Yeah, there's mainly translation and teaching, which is obviously mainly in high schools and colleges, and then there is literature that is has different spheres where it's dealt with. Some research happens in universities and is analyzed, in academic spheres such as SOAS. And there is a writing of these languages in domestic and community spheres, and there are several writers across Britain who write in these languages. And then there is a public performance, particularly poetry reciting in mushairas. And I am not aware of any publishing resources of South Asian languages in Britain. Publishing is mainly arranged from back home. And the poetry in different forms I have come across in these languages, Urdu, Punjabi, Bahari, and Potwari, is there is mainly romantic poetry. There is some political, and there is also some religious poetry, Naat and Sufi writing, and then there is a comical or satirical. And the prominent poets. There is long list of poets in North, Midland, and South who write poetry in these languages. But I'm not going in too much detail about that, due to time constraint. And in the prose writing, I have come across novels, mainly in Urdu, but also now in other languages. Short stories, and then dramas, and people's life stories and memoirs, and then migration histories. And there are also some books appeared recently on social history of people's area of origin. And then there is religious preaching literature. And then I have a list of prominent prose writers who have written different sort of forms. There is one very detailed history of migration. It's called Pakistan se Hindustan Tak. That gives the detailed history of migration and settlement of South Asian, while it mainly focuses on Pakistanis and Kashmiris. But it has some comparison with the English version of Asian in Britain by Rosina Wisram. And then there is a very classic reportage that was written about 50 years ago by a writer based in Birmingham, Mahmood Hashmi, who at that time was in Kashmir, and it's called Kashmir Udas Hai. But now, then he has added, after 50 years, he has added a couple of more chapters where he writes about the people's here who migrated there and their stories and how they were settling in, and it is very interesting read. Then of course we have Abdullah Hussain and Safia Siddiqui. Abdullah Hussain is a novelist, and maybe Anita will talk about him more. And Safia Siddiqui, she has written short stories, and I don't know whether she has written any novel. And then there are personal stories of people who migrated. One of them migrated in the early 1940s, and he wrote his story. His name is Muhammad Yusuf, and his book is called Dastan-e-Yusuf, the story of Yusuf. But obviously that has a connection with Yusuf Zalaika, because that was one of the major piece of literature available to people before 47, along with Seth Maruk and Hiranja and other epics like that. And it narrates the story of how he went from a village in Mirpur to Bombay to work on the merchant navy ships, and from there he went to USA, and from there he came to Britain, and then he went back to Kashmir in late 90s. And then we have some social histories. My main kind of interest is in Pahari Pochwari writing. And there is still a debate, there is still a debate, amongst the speakers of this language and the writers of this language, that whether Punjabi, Pahari, Pochwari, Hindko and Dogri are dialects of Punjabi or of Pahari or Pochwari, or they predated Punjabi that was in fact grown out of these languages. So these debates are ongoing thing. But one thing is very clear, that all of these languages are mutually understandable. And some writers like Akhtar Imam Rizvi describe these languages as a family of languages. And if we compare the literature produced in these languages with other mainstream South Asian languages like Hindi or Urdu, so obviously there is not much literature produced in these languages. Because one of the main reasons is that in India, are those Kashmiris who come from Indian side are there, they are taught in schools to read Hindi and Urdu, and those in Pakistan or on the Pakistani side of Kashmir, they are taught to read and write in Urdu. So this situation initially was replicated here in Britain as well. People were seen as, they're speaking of, either they speak Hindi or Urdu, or from Indian side, the Gujarati and then Bangla and Punjabi languages asserted themselves and became recognized. But Pahari and Potwari continually struggling to get some recognition. When I came to Britain, I was very kind of proud that I'm very well literate in Urdu, and I had my English was not very good. It's still not very good, and I had some complex about that as well. You know, going through the schooling there, the English was seen as something not learnable, and but here I had to learn writing in my mother tongue, because when I came here, I saw that there is some kind of complex in people about this language, and if there are about 20 people sitting in a room, all Pahari speakers, and one person comes in, either Urdu speaker or Punjabi speaker, they will all try to speak Urdu or Punjabi. And when obviously some of them can't speak properly, so when that person or person will move, they then laugh at each other that you can't speak it right and you can't speak it right. And when you ask them which language you speak, they will say we speak Punjabi. So this kind of situation, then some friends of I met here, we thought maybe the one reason is that because this language, particularly Poshwari and Pahari, is not written, so therefore people don't see it as a language. So we thought to start writing this language. We came up with an alphabet, and alphabet was used, which is also used in Urdu and based on Arabic and Persian. But obviously we have certain sounds for which Urdu does not have letters. So we created 2 new letters to have our own alphabet. And due to the latest developments in technology, we were able to write it better, and we produced the first Pahari Potwari magazine from Manchester in 1990s. It was called Chitka, and Chitka is a very peculiar Pahari word, and it means the sunshine in the winter mornings. And at that stage, we have this friend of ours, Ali Adalat, born in Azad Kashmir in a village, in a remote village, and he migrated to Britain in, I think, 1970s. And he was a good friend, but he was very critical of our efforts to write this language, because he said because he said that it will distract, because we were part of the Kashmir movement as well, so he said it will distract people here in Britain from the Kashmir struggle, and it will create divisions and all that. And obviously we were not convinced, and so we carried on. And his other argument was that this language cannot be written. And even if you write it, who will read it? But interestingly, his wife, who is literate only in Quranic Arabic, she can read Quran, she managed to read a story published in Chitka. It called Masi Janto Bus Podi. Auntie Janto rode the bus. And whether it was because of this incident, or because all of his friends were in this Chitka magazine committee, so he also joined us. And surprisingly, he was the first person who wrote, when he started writing, he had his book published, the collection of his short stories, in 1999. And it was called Punch Na Sarmad, the chief of Punch. And obviously it was not, maybe it would have taken a lot longer to have his work published if it was not Baba Akhtar Imam Rizvi, who is no more with us, who was working for the development of Potwari in Pakistan, and especially on Radio Pakistan, where he worked as, retired as chief executive. He visited in Britain in 1997 to attend a South Asian Literary conference in Oldham, and he had opportunity to read some of Adalat's work. So then he was so impressed, and he said, "This is very good writing, and I'm going to arrange for his publication." So he did it. And that was his first book, Punchna Sarmal. And in 2002, another of his book was published called Tarani Ag, The Fire in the Mountains. And again, Akhtar Imam Rizvi made all the arrangements for its publication. And the first one had 8 stories, the second one had 11 stories. And then after about 3-4 years, he had his first novel published, Mela Asman, The Dirty Sky. And this was again published by Akhtar Imam Rizvi. And this is the story of British underclass in the back streets of Rochdale that deals with marginalization, exclusion, racism, internal prejudices, which we were talking about earlier, of the South Asians, and hypocrisy of religious and other affluent people who still have those some of the baggages with them, and sometimes it comes to play here in different situations. And later his writing was reached out to the Indian side of Kashmir, and a special number of very reputed journal was dedicated to his writing and his analysis. And then he wrote a Pahari film. Two Pahari films. One was a musical, Mehndi Lande, Let Me Put Henna On, and then the feature film, Lakir, The Line. And he has recently finished another novel which I have typed, and I think that is going to be a classic of Pahari writing. So this was the guy who said, my writing. And so I would read a few, just maybe a couple of paragraphs from one of his stories, which became very popular, and it is from his first collection, Punchna Sarmal. The story is read in groups at various places in Azad Kashmir and Potwar. It is called Bagheni Pug, the turban of Bagha. Bagha is the name of a person. It is narrated from the memories of the author of the period just before the construction of Mangla Dam in Mirpur, which submerged this ancient town of Kashmir and nearly 300 surrounding villages. The story is about a man called Bagha, who is a livestock trader and a great storyteller. So when he tells people of Arthur's village about the rumors of building a dam on the river Jhelum, people take it as another of his stories and laugh at the idea of stopping the river, and that too of mighty Jhelum. However, when they could see the mechanical giants moving around Mirpur city, they started believing Bagha, and the thought of losing the city and surrounding area generated a great deal of anxiety and fear among people. It captures the graphic detail of the drowning of life bit by bit in water and the breakup of social fabric rooted in centuries. Its climax is when the shocks of seeing Mirpur drowning in water before his eyes cripples Bagha, and he paralyzes him, and he becomes ill and bedridden within days, and sends his son to see the drowning of his village, Babiam. And upon their return, Bagha asked them about the minute details of how the water swallowed each and everything of Babiam. But the paragraphs I have translated and going to read are about a woman whose father dies just before the water rises, and she wants to bury him outside the area that was demarcated to be submerged in the Mangla lake. But the peer of that area, who was to lead the funeral prayer, Janaza, brands this desire as un-Islamic, but later when he realizes that the grave of his father was also going to become underwater, he turns the removal of his father's body from grave into a mass event of spirituality, and, and claimed that those who witness this great transfer are the most fortunate people. I don't think I could do justice with the translation, but I hope that some meanings will be conveyed. The author writes that this took me back several years to the day when I went to a funeral with my mother in the Ara village before it was surrounded by the Mangla lake. The village was almost deserted. People had started to salvage whatever they could of their homes. The deceased sons were pleading to be allowed to bury their father outside of the area that was to be submerged. His daughter was wailing and saying, "Oh father, I don't know where I would be ended up. I don't know if I would ever be able to visit your grave." The daughter lived just outside the demarcated area. All the family members were pleading to be allowed to bury him outside of the area that were to come under water. Having heard all this wailing and pleadings, the local peer who was to lead janaza became hysterical and said, "Oh, you ignorant, irrational beings, listen to me. What you are asking for is against the law of Shariat, the ways of Islam. The deceased will be buried right here, or go and find someone else to lead the funeral prayers." The daughter of the deceased started wailing loud, "Oh, my beloved father, had I been aware of this cruelty, I would have carried you to my own home before your soul left your body." The peer, telling her off, shouted, "Oh girl, don't commit blasphemy. The dead belong to the earth. This soil was written in his destiny from the day one." This made Baga jump. Settling his turban on his head, he said, if this soil was written in his destiny, then this too would have been written, that this land will not be flooded and stay free for people to grow sugarcane, the sweet sugarcane. Don't know what more he would have been said, but someone put hand on his mouth and silenced him. But his words were picked up, and in the next Friday prayer, the Imam of local mosque said in his sermon, "Those who utter this kind of thoughts are pure kafirs, irreligious, like the white man. All non-believers have become one. Look at the graves of those who had power. The water bare touches them. The bulldozers don't go near them." The people shouted slogan to that, but Baga was thinking what his elders did wrong, why their bones were so weak. Then he started repeating this outside of the mosque, in every gathering, in every meeting. No one answered his question, but he kept repeating it like a broken record. He kept asking, "Someone tell me, make me understand, why are we drowned like this? Are we the pharaohs?" He kept asking questions and water kept rising. The area kept drowning, villages after villages. Everyone was on the move. There were few people who stayed put in the village with Baga. All preparations were completed. The time of the rising of the water to Baga's village, Babiam, was fixed. Suddenly, mosques started making announcements. Whoever wants to see the miracles, come to the shrine of beads on Sunday and see how the beautiful God keeps his own people protected in their graveyards. It was announced that the Buzurg of Pir Sahib, father of the local Pir, came in someone's dreams and asked to be taken out of the reach of water. To this, Baga thought, God can do everything. Possibly he won't let water flow forward. May his ancestors also come in his dreams, but they did not. On Sunday, he too went to the shrine. A huge crowd was gathered. The body was taken out, but the arrangements were such that no common person was left near the grave. Someone said conversation could be heard from inside the grave. Soon this was repeated everywhere, and drums and flutes were started playing and slogans were shouted. That girl too came to the gathering without any hat covering. She was wailing, "Oh my beloved father, they buried you there where you will be soon in water, but they have taken their own father away. Tell me, my father, what can I do?" Some people started saying, "She has lost it. She's gone mad. What is the comparison of your father with the great spiritual being?" On that day, Baga, who never took off his turban, took it off to cover the head of that girl. "My child, what you were saying is truth. But what is the value of truth today? Keep quiet, my child. Stay quiet.
I'm aware that we're running out of time completely and that you're all absolutely exhausted, so I'm going to be as brief as possible and then just open up for questions, if that's okay. I was going to talk a little bit about Abdullah Hussain and Amajid Chandan. Abdullah Hussain is a very, very sort of classical Urdu novelist, and Amajid Chandan is a fantastic Punjabi poet. But because of the shortage of time, I think I'll just focus on Amajid Chandan and a little on Punjabi. Just to say that Abdullah Hussain wrote this amazing, amazing book, which is called Udas Nasli, in about 1984, and he himself was the translator of it. So he's done a fantastic job in the actual English translation, and then he moved here. So it's called Weary Generations in English, and then it's a partition novel, but it's a partition novel often about people who don't know that partition is taking place because it's in the villages. And as you know, the news got to the villages really, really late, so people didn't even realize that there was, what was happening. So it's set in the Punjab, and it's set in mostly in rural Punjab, though bits of it moved to Lahore. And then he moved to England, and since he's moved to England, he's been writing in English, which I find slightly interesting as well, given what we've been talking about. But just a little bit then about Amajid Chandan and the use of Punjabi. Punjabi used to be the second most widely spoken language in Britain. It's now, I've been told, recently been knocked down from that position. Polish is second, apparently. Punjabi is now number 3. So it's an incredibly, amazingly, so wherever you go in sort of Asian areas, you will hear people speaking Punjabi. So it's very, very widely spoken, but it's not widely read. And there are political reasons for that, in the sense of when I'm talking, like say in India and in Pakistan, when you have a national language being imposed upon a country and that forming part of your identity, your vernacular languages get knocked down from the hierarchy. So Punjabi has never been encouraged as a literary language, as a language that you sit and read. You might hear it, you will hear it spoken in the house, so it becomes a domestic language, but you will also hear it in the great sort of the Sufi tradition, the verses, the poetry, the songs, all the modern groups as well. The modern sort of pop groups in Pakistan are singing in Punjabi mixed with English, and it's it's really good and it's really sort of vibrant. But people don't read it, and they also don't read it because they haven't been educated in reading it. I'll say from my own experiences, I only learned to speak Punjabi when I was grown up. I learned to read it much later. For other reasons. And when we're looking, I'd say Amajid is a poet, and he writes, if you see, this is the first sort of, I think they call this a dual text in Punjabi and English. I can't actually read the Gurmukhi, I read in the Urdu script, which is called Shamurki, and but he's very kind. He sent me one poem in Shamurki, which I will read. And I think that when you look at any kind of poetry which is in translation, the poets know this much better than I do, is that when you've got a different syntax involved, when you've got a different grammar structure, like where our verbs are placed in different places, where we've got gendered objects, where you've got a different rhythm sound, where we allow for repetition, which is, has been sort of wiped out largely from the Western tradition. It still remains prevalent in sort of songs, but in the Western traditions, the allowance of repetition is not really there. And whereas in the Punjabi and the Urdu and the South Asian languages, we have that sort of refrain line which runs throughout a poem or a nazm, but it continuously changes in meaning, given what's gone before. So it might sound like to someone, oh, this is the refrain line, like a pop song, but it's not, because it changes given what's gone before and what's to come after. So I think those are the problems of when you're translating. You've got all these issues of sound and grammar, which you have to take into account. So when a poet is writing from a different sort of tradition and a different place, I think one of the key aspects that we sort of notice is this idea of location. Not only where is it located, which is like the sort of the physical geography of a place, and what that gives you, like a particular rural landscape, the names of certain birds, the influence of a certain river or a culture which is of that place. But I think it's also location in a sort of historicity, where it comes from. Like say the poem that I'm going to read a little bit of in the Punjabi, it's set in rural Punjab in India, but because it's based on a tradition which is more of a desert culture, which might be, sort of migrant Indian communities coming from their own desert, could be the migrants coming from Arabia, all of that. There are those written into the poetry as well, which I find is an interesting aspect. Then there's things I'd like for us to be able to discuss in the 5 minutes we'll probably have left over, is the idea of sensibility. And I don't mean by sensibility something like, what is your sensibility? Are you a good person, bad? But a sensibility which is locked into the idea of senses, the uses of eyes and, how you tactile things, what you're touching, what you're seeing, and how you're bringing those senses into play into a language, which can often be, I think, very different. It's about how your body is embodied and how your physicality manifests itself in a language. So that you will find in Punjabi poetry, often in Urdu poetry as well, but less because it's become more sort of urban, I think. You'll find particular tropes, as you do with any poetry, so you'll have birds and the river and the water and the desert, and they run through this kind of poetry. And in the shaping of any kind of writing, which we've all been talking about, is not only the location of your present, but it's what I was talking about, is your historicities, not only your own sort of genealogy, your own past, but it's your collective past. I think it's about how you see yourself as being identified. Do you see yourself as a particular caste, member of a caste, a particular religion? Do you see yourself mostly in a female body, mostly in a male? All of those things come into place, and your politics come into place. And they come in very sort of subtle ways. But I think also what we often sort of forget is things that influences of what you've read, and what you've, in the oral tradition, what you've heard as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. I think what's very interesting about Amarjit and Abdullah Hassan is that they've both chosen to translate their own work. So that gives them a certain level of autonomy. Amarjit has done the first translations of his verse, and then he's worked with some poets, English poets, to refine it, in the case of some poems. Abdullah Hassan has done the translation himself, and it's a really fine translation. And I think that is also what we've been talking about, the idea of power. How do you keep your identity, what you're trying to say? As regards Punjabi readership, it's very small and it's diminishing. It's very small because, as we said, people don't tend to read Punjabi, and this new generation are not reading it, they're not learning it. So they might be hearing it in the form of pop songs, but then there's a difference between the level of complexity and simplicity of that not always, but I think poetry is often, for want of a better word, more complex than a lot of songs. Not all songs, there are fantastic songs like Smokey Robinson's things, but which are great ideas and lyrics as well. Talk a little bit about connecting to what we've been talking about today, which some of us were a little trembling over this word of authenticity, and do we want to talk about it? I would like to put it in terms of a true and a false voice. And true to whom, and and false to whom? Is it true to yourself and is that enough? Or is it true to the people that you were talking about? I mean, like I was saying to Aisha just now, when I was back in Lahore teaching, and we'd invited some of the students to come and talk, Hussein and Hanif and all these people. And the students, which I didn't expect, because like 21, 22-year-olds, all very pretty rich, and they absolutely trashed these writers. They said, what are you doing? You're writing for a Western audience. This is not us. This is not our culture. And these were people who are not particularly religious. Some of them could be, but they felt that this was a selling out. So I think that is something that is there in the mix. And so with this idea of voice, I wanted to say that when Graves talks about having, in his grammar book, about talking about having a reader over your shoulder, which I remember reading years ago, is that I think that's right. What we've been taught, do you write with a reader? Do you write with some consciousness, your mother, your best friend, whoever it might be, of someone that you want to speak to, your grandmother who told you the stories? I don't know. And I think there's a difference between having a little bit of a conscience, like a little angel, sort of sitting there, that you want to talk to, and I think there's a difference of having a sort of a little monster or a demon that is sort of guiding you in a particular direction. So those are some of the things I just wanted to touch on and quickly have a read. So this is one poem of Amarjit's, which is fantastic in the Punjabi, but I'm sorry we couldn't find the Punjabi and the Shamukhi, so I'm just going to read it in English. And he's translated this himself. It's called Wear Me. Wear me, I want to rub against every part of your body. Make me your necklace, I want to be close to your jugular. Wear me, as the sound weaves the word, as the seed wears the skin, as the book wears the touch of hands, as the sea wears the sky, as God wears worlds. Wear me. So that's one in English, in the translation. And I'm just going to read a little bit of this one in Punjabi, just for the sound. Dil lar tali I beer di har gali aaj. Dar tu vichni gunj mor ghar aandi. Chiri uchi taan uma de tumbere wali. Hamshir veer de dukh behan wali. And I just wanted to, so you can hear a little bit of the rhythm, the veer in the story, because a lot of the poems are narrative poems. The veer is the brother, and the hamshira is the sister. So it's this song about a brother and a sister relationship. And he goes on to say how he is silent, the brother is silent, and the sister is singing, and she's singing for his return. So it's about that kind of relationship. I just want to read the last line, which is Ape ben, Ape ami, Ape baap, kaise tandi, which is I myself am the sister, I am the brother, I am the mother. So whom do I call to? And that line is a direct reference back to Bulleh Shah, which is a direct reference back to Rumi. And if you look at the references, there are references to deserts, there are particular birds. A tambura is one of those, those stringed instruments, the one which is, I was asking Amajit, I said, what the hell is this called in English? And he said, oh, it's a single string instrument. I said, that doesn't make sense. It's like this. You can have the same thing in medieval Western tradition as well. It's like this, and it has like. So there are specific references, and when the soul is conjoined with this single string instrument, we immediately get the image. When we have the idea of the desert, and it's like there's a line which says he's in the desert and it's hot, and he says ke buk ke pani pita, and it's like that. So you take a little bit of water in the palm of your hands, and that is like everything is dried out. But there is this one sort of aspirational element. And when you think of the rural landscape of the Punjab and how central water is to everything growing and existing, then it takes on different layers of meaning. So yeah, that's just some of the things I wanted to throw at you. I think the idea of their readership is interesting. I think the ideas of what they're trying to do with their actual work is interesting, and what they're doing in translation, of sort of keeping hold as much as they can. I mean, it sounds, the poetry in English is very fine. It's nothing in comparison to the sound and especially when Amajit reads it himself. He's a very fine reader. But it's the complexity then has a certain level of grace to it, which the English has, but in a different way, because just of the different syntaxes of the languages. Thank you. Everyone wants to leave that.
I just wanted to say thank you for that. I really enjoyed it, and I'm currently reading Bullish by Baba Farid because when I'm trying to put together some kind of something that I intend to deliver at workshops, which involves Persian poetry with the poetry Punjabi. But now, as I've done that, I'm looking at Punjabi poetry, and I think it was interesting what you said that about repetition. And I think because in Urdu poetry, or let's say poetry in these, there is no such thing as spoken word. It is spoken, and then written is spoken, spoken is written. It's all one. So it makes it easier. Whereas in English poetry, we have the slam poetry. We have, it's very clearly defined. There are different sort of types of poetry in that way. But it's really nice to hear it in Punjabi because I ordered the books and I didn't realise that they didn't have I wanted to read it in the original
There's one.
English transcription of Punjabi.
There's.
But I don't know which one to get.
I've done some translations. I can send you. I mean, I've done some translations, and I can send it to you in Roman and English.
Yeah, but that's what I want to do. Yeah, because it's and I agree with the rhythm. There is a natural rhythm. I met a Persian poet the other day at the workshop, and I just saw some script on it in the notes. I could tell she was writing in Arabic. She read it out to me. It was just her notes, but it had a natural rhythm. It wasn't a poem. There's just inherently there's a natural rhythm in these languages. But I wouldn't dismiss any English poetry. I think English has its. If I didn't have English as a language in my head, I wouldn't be able to say the things that It allows me to rebel.
Yeah.
As a young Asian female, poet, it allows me to rebel. There's something that the Urdu and Punjabi gives me, which kind of finds its way into its English and softens it. So it's interesting, and I've really enjoyed listening to you. Thank you. I have to leave. Thank you very much. It's been nice meeting you.
Could I just say that Shem was talking about Dalit? I think he's actually with us.
He's there, the fireman.
I think that's really interesting, right? It's really such a big subject. I don't really know where to kind of go with it.
I think it's probably difficult, but I do think it's probably a point of despair. I know that Amajit himself, his own children do not speak Punjabi, and so this new generation is not learning it. Is not learning it. They're not learning the languages, and that means I feel that you can be cut off from some sensibility. To get back to Kavita's point, is that when you have the memoirs in which the kids do not understand the whole complexity of what their parents are speaking, then it's perhaps easier to mock it. Because
when do you think the actual displacement took place? Was it pre or post partition? Was it
with the languages?
Yeah.
Well, I think Punjabi, if you look at the regional languages, like say when the British came into power, all the regional languages were doing very sort of strongly. We had, like in India, in Sindh, we had 17 newspapers being published, just in Sindh. Punjabi was publishing everything, and then it became diminished as you need one language to control people, of course.
which was
Yeah, Urdu/Hindi. Urdu/Hindi, and that became a requirement to get jobs. And then when national identities came into place, Pakistanis absorbed Urdu quicker, and I think the Indians remained with their regional languages for a while. But then if you look at the sort of the emergence and the strength of television, and that became more Urdu, more Hindiized, and then you hear more Sanskrit coming slowly into the TV programs and into, so it rubs away the regional identities.
And even now, even the Urdu and the Hindi now being replaced with English.
Yeah.
And
But
there's
that's-
some schools in Pakistan where they strictly don't allow their own mother tongue. They'll say you have to speak English. Teachers and pupils, all of them.
Yeah, that's true. But then again, we've got TV, which is promoting Urdu amazingly, and pop songs in Urdu and Punjabi. So there are always waves of change. You can't say that any one thing is, sort of static, and there might not be a political rebellion, but there's a cultural rebellion.
And even through the generations, like you were saying, the next generation not learning the language, they might understand it because our parents speak it, but as far as speaking it themselves or being able to read and write, it's not happening.
Just talking about rebellion, I'm just quite interested in that, the language of protest, the language of the rebel in a sense, and do you think Punjabi had that position to play or facilitate, say, pre-partition in its own way?
I think so, but I think probably all the regional languages did, in the sense that if you think of, has anyone seen this fantastic Bengali film which came about 5-6 years ago, and in English is called The Clay Bird? No? It's a really, really good film. It's set in this 1971 war, and it's to do with the political changes which are happening in 71. But at the same time, it's the movement of a household and a regular sort of family sort of thing. And in many ways, it kind of precedes Pan's Labyrinth in that way of having a political, the film, the Spanish? No? Yeah, sort of mythical sort of thing, story of a family. And then the political side, this film came several years earlier. And so if you look at those films, where you have wandering minstrels telling stories. You have the stories of the people being told, you have Quranic surahs being read, you have poetry. I mean, like when I was working, I love Punjabi by working in the villages in rural Punjab. And my mum hates the way I speak Punjabi, to be honest. And it's, and you would still have, I mean, half of my work has been on Polish up, but you have people who can correct you when you say things wrong. They go, no, this is how it is. And they're totally, illiterate is the wrong word, unlettered. And they have this store of beauty with them, and I think all those ideas are challenging. They're incredibly challenging. That's why we've had Marxist discourses on Sufi poetry, religious discourses on Sufi poetry, because they're not just one thing to one people.
I had a question for Shamas. So you were talking about Bahari, Patwari coming about. It came about in England, the written form.
Yes. Well, previously, obviously, people wrote letters in this language, and some poets in Potwar and Azab Kashmir wrote poetry in it. But one, the magazine, the prose writing was basically started from here.
And has that gone? Is that being read?
But then we were told, because then somebody came from the Valley of Kashmir over, and they say they have this Academy of Art, Languages and Culture there, and they are publishing the Bahari magazine since 1981. So he brought some copies for us as well. So on that side, it was written a long time before us. But then we got connected. Then we realized that there are some people in the Hinko area. They also written some books in Hindi poetry. And coincidentally or interestingly, they developed the same alphabet letters additionally as we did, and we had no connection before that.
Is it phonetic?
Yeah.
Okay. And how different is Hindu from Purwani?
Not very different. There are only few words and the accent is different. Yeah. And
So it's like similar to
about 80-90% mutually comprehensible. Indo, Potwari, Pahari, Dogri, yeah, and Punjabi. They are usually more understandable. Gojri is also very close, but that is slightly different.
But the Punjabi and Pahari language, culturally,
Yeah,
they are very different.
And
What
is
about
it
Sindor?
taught?
What about Sindor? Is it being taught here?
No, it's not taught anywhere. On the other side, obviously, there is some work. People are going to villages and collecting stories, and on that side there is more work carried out.
I don't know if you got that. The work I did was, one of the dimensions was absolutely right. I thought, what do we need this party for? Yeah. And then Sharmas and Karek and Binder and Sundar, and they were my friends, and they stood up. And I thought they were going to disown me. But when they were writing, one of the things we said earlier on is very interesting. Because they were all middle class, I was the only working class. Boarder, farmer, I knew how to farm, I knew how to work at the last. I knew, what bees they were talking and geese and that. And they were writing about it. I thought, they're writing a language, but they don't know jack shit about it. So I was doing interrupt. I said, no, it's not like that, it's not like that. I said, you write it. And I said, I will bet. So I did. Then I found, and it was fascinating, there was a university called Sharma. It was a Buddhist university. 2,500 years ago, as the remains are still there about Muzaffarabad. And then I found is the Saraswati Devi, the goddess of learning, the goddess of learning, and she's got 3 dimensions. I've seen 2 dimensions, I've got 4 plus in there. The other one is seen from the other side. I went to see him, and I wanted to go by a lot of writing, so I couldn't go. And it was fascinating that the writing trend, apart from Babylonia, it started in Sharda. There were 2 places, one in Babylonia, one in Sharda. And then it wasn't Pali then, I don't know what it was called. And then, like Shiv and Saraswati, the rock from Same Valley. And the writing trends were different, and then it kept developing, and then it became the Buddhist inspired official language. And religious language, all the books were in Pali, everything was, and then the invaders went in, after I think Alexandria was restored to text. After that, because it was obscure in mountains, it survived. Otherwise it's gone. A lot of people, about this notion that it's died. This is the language we started writing trends. Even Chinese came out of the gender blend, like all the rest of it. So it's absolutely fascinating. But the cultural DNA and the language. But what I wanted to share was, because there are some young writers there, they might think in English. I can never think in English. I always think in Pali. And then I translate in my head. And what I can say in Pali, I can't say it in English. What I can express my emotions.
Can you give us an example?
Well, I'm telling you, I can never express. I always do.
In the heart of the language, say.
Yeah, I'm not. We haven't got time to read a story.
Manaya Pari Garba.
She wants to say something.
मंगला डे बनाई ना ते रोजी ना छट्टा मारी बिना सारी दुनिया जैसा मैं चलाना गेम
It's not similar, isn't it? It's similar to Urdu and Hindi as well. It is.
चोरा के लिए उर्दू हिंदी बोले वाले सब नहीं है
नहीं बस कुछ समझे जो तो सिर्फ पंजाबी बना के ना
But it's
Well,
interesting.
there are overlaps, like because I come from a
so
and this, Sharjah. You know, I did some work there, you know, like union work with Kashmiri refugees. They couldn't understand the talk, and I couldn't understand that. But the border areas cross over. And if you went further in, you know, like into the Jodi and that, you won't be able to understand the talk. So there are a lot of that. Language is not static, it's dynamic, it's always fluid, it's always. You know, Punjabi though, but when I read Farid and that, I think, oh, it's not Punjabi, it's Iraqi. It's coming down river Indus, you know, like Gandhara, Rapa, you know, like, no, it's not Punjabi. But it's political, it's power, it's money, it's geography, it's who is powerful, his language is there.
It sounds quite different from Kashmiri, like spoken Kashmiri, it sounds completely different.
Kashmir is absolutely different.
Kavita should say, but on behalf of Elizabeth, who come for the first time, thank you all very much for inviting us. It was a really interesting, exhilarating experience, and we hope to see you soon. I'll leave it to Kavita to go.
Well, thank you all for coming, and it's been a really, really nice day. If you found it interesting, learned a lot and really enjoyed it. For those of you who can stick around and want to stick around, I was thinking of where we could maybe go. Some of you have mentioned, is Corner House a good place, or somewhere? Yeah. So maybe we could all just continue the conversation if you can stick around at Corner House.
Or it might be.
I mean, we're all going anyway.
Yeah.
Come back.